There was a lot of discussions. Good. Then you are on the go. So I try, even though there are some people outside the room, but I hope you are who are online that you are with us now. So now let's get started with our second panel, exploring accessibility. And to help to lead us the discussion, we have a member of the Executive Board of the European Disability Forum, Humberto Insolera. So the floor is yours, Humberto. Welcome.
Good morning. I hope you enjoyed your fika. And welcome back. I'm very happy to introduce the second panel for today. How accessible EU can have an impact on local communities. Disability rights are key concepts overall for this conference, and a key concept in the UN CRPD. Article 9 of the CRPD focuses on accessibility. It clearly states that state parties must create accessible environments, services that are available to the public, that those have to be accessible. And it's a horizontal article in the sense that it covers all of life, all the other articles: employment, independent living, education, employment, communication, all important aspects of everyday life. An important first aspect is accessibility awareness. Still a great challenge. So this conference is an excellent opportunity for private actors, decision makers, EU institutions, but also local organizations to discuss what needs to be done, what can be done in terms of developing standards. The European Commission soon will open EU Accessibility Center. And it's good to see that public money is spent on this center, the center of expertise that will provide support to those who want to make their products, services, transport systems, infrastructure accessible. We have different tools available aiming at inclusion and creating an inclusive society for people with disabilities. But important is that both the EU and member states have committed to working towards a better society which is more inclusive. In this panel, we'll focus on the EU Accessibility Center and how it can support other actors. Support to implement the obligations coming from the CRPD in terms of accessibility, universal design, and how EU funding can be used for creating a more inclusive society. We have two people present with us today. First of all, Placencia Porrero, working for who's a senior expert in the European Commission on disability, and Quarnström, who represents Disability Rights Stockholm, of which organization she is the president. Online, we have Hernández Galán, representing Funktionsrätt, and he is the director on accessibility within Funktionsrätt. Welcome.
Low.
We have around 40 minutes for the panel members to speak. I will present you with some questions. And we want to make sure that at the end we have room for you in the audience and for those online to ask questions. My first question goes to you, Ima. The EU. How are EU how's the EU going to implement and monitor the implementation of Article 9 of the CRPD and the EU legislation? What are the next steps you foresee?
Okay, so this is really a very wide question. As such, we do not monitor the Article 9 of the Convention. We are a state party, the EU is a state party, and we as focal point implement Article 9 of the Convention. How are we doing that? We are doing that with legislation and policies. With legislation, the EU has developed quite a wide number of different directives and regulations in the area of accessibility. We mentioned this morning the Accessibility Act, the Web Accessibility Directive. We have quite a lot of accessibility legislation also in other areas like transport, for example, in the area of rail. But we also have accessibility obligations in EU funds and accessibility obligations in public procurement. Whatever is being bought that it is going to be used by people, the EU legislation says that it needs to be accessible. So how do we implement Article 9? We facilitate the implementation of the general concepts that are in Article 9, the general obligations to ensure access on equal basis with others to products, services, facilities open or provided to the public. To facilitate that implementation of accessibility, we also develop European standards. We have now a standard on the ICT accessibility that, by the way, is being adopted even outside the European Union to implement accessibility policies. We have a standard in the built environment. We have a standard on processes. What does an organization needs to do in order to ensure that the outcome, whether they do deliver services or they provide products, are accessible. That outcomes need to be accessible following a design for all, a universal design and diversity approach. To that, we are adding to facilitate implementation of the Accessibility Act, other standards. One on what is accessibility for non-digital information, emergency communications, how do we make the European number 112 and the response to 112 accessible for persons with disabilities, and a third standard, how do we make sure that support services when you have to call your bank or when you contract a telephone line is being accessible. So to do that, we have launched Accessible EU as a center that will bring policy makers, stakeholders, experts together in order to share good practices and implement, facilitate that implementation of accessibility. The idea is to have events at national level to build capacity. People need to be able to build and implement our accessibility legislation. And I am stopping here. My clock tells me it's 3 minutes, so I come to the next question after, complement with the next question.
Thank you. Thank you for staying within the time and your comprehensive answer. Anna, you work on the local level in Stockholm. How are you dealing with accessibility within Stockholm on the local level?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and representing the local society. We have a situation of growing frustration. Ambitious goals have always been set by the government and in all levels of local authority, if not least in the local society. But despite this, there's only a mere percent of the budget that used to be allocated to this issue have been left for today. And what we are experiencing are quite often an insufficient organization, coordination, and execution of these issues on a local level. As a result, accessibility is achieved on some places, in some areas, but not guaranteed. And this means that, unfortunately, many people today are experiencing very real issues on an everyday basis, affecting all areas of the everyday life, such as social and economical and all various aspects of life, really. And we also feel like there's been a slowdown of the process in achieving these accessibility goals that we are being put in official documents. And actually, in some areas that we are going backwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you both for being very concise. And we hear the same messages from other countries. But let's move to another country, actually. Mr. Hernández, one of the key characteristics of the new EU Accessibility Center will help you in your work. And how is Fundación Onsen going to work on accessibility? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like, as Inma said, the European Accessibility Resource Center is launched by the Commission and is funded by the DG Employment, and is one of the flagships of the study for the rights of persons with disability. First of all, I would like to say who is working on the Accessible EU Center, which is the consortium. Is led by Fundación Once, and as the Commission want to work, we are going to work on for the most important pillars on accessibility, on transport, on built environment, on policies and ICT. And for that, we have in the consortium very experimented organization to work in these pillars. The consortium is built by ENAT, the European Network for Accessible Tourism, and the Johannes Kepler University of Linz. This university has a huge experience on ICT. The EASPD, the European Association of Provider Services for People with persons with disabilities, and the standardization, the Spanish standardization body, UNE. We have involved in the center also the two most important umbrellas, of course, EDF, representing people with disabilities, and AIDS, representing people, older people. What we are going to do in the center, because the center doesn't have a place, a specific place, don't have a building, is just this distributed knowledge center. We're going to support the implementation of the European Union legislation on accessibility. We are going to work, and we're working on building the capacity on accessibility in the EU countries. We will connect stakeholders responsible for implementing accessibility rules in the EU. We are going to create a common European one-stop shop on accessibility. We are working in a big platform, to put there all the information, all the resources, the most important resources on accessibility, in order to disseminate the knowledge, in order to train all the professionals, to train all the stakeholders to know all the aspects and the necessities around the accessibility, because it is important to have a pool of excellent professionals training up on accessibility. And we are going to work in a study per year, selected, and it will be a topic selected by the Commission. And this year we are working in the study about the multimodality and how the multimodality in the services will enhance the accessibility. What results will be expected per year from the Accessible EU? We are going to create a community of practices connecting professionals and stakeholders, and we will have around 500 new members per year. We will have a big library with the most important resources, with the most important books and documents of the accessibility, and we will have around 60 entries per year in this library. We're going to collect, as Inma said, good practices at the European level, at the national level also, and we have around 150 good practices per year. Inma said also we have to organize events, and we will have around 88 events, 5 of them at the European level and the other 83 at national level. It will be events, the awareness raising events, workshops in order to train this professional on accessibility, and networking events. And now we have in the center, there are 34 experts from the 27 member states. So we have a pool of professionals in order to disseminate the knowledge of accessibility, to help all the stakeholders to know better the accessibility needs, and to help to the countries to implement the different legislation on accessibility, and Inma said before.
Thank you. For explaining the work program of the EU Accessibility Center. It's a great tool. But a question for you, Inma. You're developing technical standards on accessibility. This year, 6 new standards will be developed, or the process will start. And can you explain a bit more about how persons with disability can be involved in developing these standards? Over to you.
Okay, so indeed, we are going to have a strong investment in the area of standardization. By the way, the center will also help on this, on the development of the knowledge and contributions towards standardization. So how can persons with disabilities participate? Persons with disabilities can participate in different ways. Of course, let me start with the center. I mean, in the center, they have to have a role, a leading role also in the different areas, in the creation of knowledge, in the discussions and contributions to on the work package related to standardization. But then they need to participate, or they can participate following the rules of the standardization system. The standardization bodies are autonomous bodies. At European level and at national level. And we have 2 models. In the first model, there is direct participation at European level. It's the area of telecommunications. Persons with disabilities can participate in the meetings, in their organizations. There are some rules about memberships. The European Disability Forum is participating and is a member. So through them, you are able also to participate. But that's in the meetings. Also in writing, documents are going to be public. There's going to be a system in which the drafts, standards are going to be distributed, and comments to those standards can be made. The real drafting of them, contribution to the drafting, is possible. The other model is for the other organization at European level is based on what they call the principle of national delegations. So you have national standardization bodies that bring together all stakeholders, persons with disabilities, industry, public authorities, and they have a common position that then they will defend in Europe. Okay, so very important message. Reach out to your national standardization bodies, discuss with them, say that you want to be part of that national delegation and that you want to express your views. And make sure that then that also you get the documents, because they get the draft documents, and you contribute also to the drafting. I have to say that we have been seeing an increase on the participation of persons with disabilities throughout the years. The ESOs have been asked in the most recent mandate, because they are autonomous bodies, but the Commission tells them, now we would like you, or requiring you, to do standards in this particular area. And we do that with certain conditions with a Commission decision. There we have asked them that the process, the venues, the documents have to be accessible so that persons with disabilities can participate. We also ask that reasonable accommodation should be provided into this process. So on our side, we are requesting the facilitation and setting the conditions for equal participation. And on your side, on the side of persons with disabilities, we really need to see the presence and the request to be participating and active commenting to documents. I hope that that answers your question. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for a very clear explanation. You set the conditions. We have a responsibility also to participate. You're right. Anna, on accessibility on a local level, you mentioned that there are several challenges. How are disabled people's organizations involved in increasing accessibility or breaking down the barriers to accessibility?
Well, our organization do have a dialogue with the local authority in the municipality. We also have two different departments in the local municipality, people representing different groups of people with disabilities. So there's a dialogue there, but there's a tendency that dialogue is not being put into something constructive. And many people are feeling that the dialogue is being an uphill battle instead of a constructive work together for accessibility. Perhaps most challenging is the local authorities' tendencies to look at accessibility on short term and the cost concerning that, and not being effective enough to look at the positive obligations and rather just looking at what they have. And so the discussion is not always constructive and could definitely be made into something more useful for both of the parts. So we need something more effective, and also from my point of view, we need law that will require the local authority to actually listen and put in something constructive rather than just only good practices. I know that's a good thing and something very important that we need, but we need something that also makes sure that the authority doesn't look short-term or rather try to see the organization on the local levels as something constructive to make that happen.
Thank you, Anna. Because ultimately, things need to happen on a local level, right? Mr. Hernández, how can the EU Accessibility Center contribute to accessibility on the local level also? Or are you working only with national partners?
Okay, as I told before, in the center there are 34 national experts in the big countries, in Italy, France, Spain, Poland, and Germany. In Germany, we have 3 experts, and in the other big countries, we have 2 experts, and the other one, we have in the medium and small size countries, we have 1 expert. This is the contact point in the accessible EU, and they are going to work with all the stakeholders at the national level and at the local level, who are going to participate, or who can participate in the accessible EU, and which are the national experts contact and work with. They are going to work with the private and public companies at the national level, and also at European level. Your question is about national level, with association of businesses across the industries, the person with disabilities, other person and their organizations, public administrations responsible for accessibility legislation and policies, and public procurers, public authorities responsible for market surveillance of products and compliance services with accessibility obligation, providers of services for persons with disabilities, assistive technologies providers, built environment professionals, architects, engineers, technology developers, universities and academia. Accessibility and disability, they are very important to work with the academia and to universities to introduce the accessibility knowledge, and in order to have good professionals in the future to know how apply the accessibility questions. These experts are going to will collect good practices in the different countries. They will collect documents and books for the library, and they are going to organize different events as national level. As I said before, the events will be awareness raising, workshops, and networking events. So at national level, the center will disseminate the knowledge, the awareness raising, the awareness about the accessibility. With this event, as I said, is one of the most important tasks at the national level. And also the center will promote the participation of people with disabilities on a standardization process, to be involved and in order to have all the standards, the necessities of people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you for a concise answer. Given the time, I think it's time for the audience. We have EDF staff assisting those in the room who want to raise a question, and we have EDF staff monitoring the questions put online. Anybody like to ask a question? Can I see hands, please? And please introduce yourself by name, organization, and who you would like to address the question to. Okay. And please be concise. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Cecilia Blank. I'm from the organization JAG here in Sweden, a national organization for persons with large impairments, of which one is intellectual. And I think my question is maybe for Inmaculada. We see that more and more basic service in society nowadays relies on digital identification. Different systems are used in different countries, but most of them are in fact excluding our members, who are persons who need a guardian or equivalent for handling money and other personal matters. And they are denied access when they apply for an account in these systems. And this means that they are excluded from many kinds of services, like shopping on the internet, buying cheap flight tickets, or even logging in health systems for prescriptions, medical prescriptions, or things like that. And these national systems are very established, widespread already. About 90% of the population or more are using it. And the apps that you need, they might be accessible, but our members are not allowed to use them. They are IQ discriminated because they don't understand and they can't take responsibility for a code or something. So how can the EU accessibility work help the members for accessing the systems?
Thank you. We'll take a second and third question, and then we'll give the panel members a chance to respond.
Okay. Good morning. I am Giampiero Griffo. Morning, Imma, and I represent Disabled People International Europe. The question that I put is the question about how the money from the European Union are applied at the national level, respectful of the idea of the accessibility. In the sense, in theory, we have the same standard. 27 countries have applied the convention, the European Union too. But when we understand at the national level, I speak about Italy, the use of the money, we discover that that is not so clear. I make an example. For example, the Recovery and the Resilience Plan, in the planning are the verification about the application of the right of person with disability. When we manage a directive with the government, and the government offer opportunity to the observatory to control this. We meet all ministries, and we discover that the knowledge of the unit responsible of PNRR are very poor on the field of the accessibility. And that test action produce the effect that in theory is only the mission of the health and the social affairs. There are some attention, but not all in accessibility. The other have practically no knowledge. My idea, a proposal that the European Union clarify with the money of the European Union, you must respect this standard because it's not clear. First, it's not clear about accessibility. In Italy, as is so much legislation on accessibility, so it's not a lack of legislation. But the second point is the idea is the government that I know have more money. And that is another issue. Need to clarify that the money for this policy are for all. A quote of the money need to be used for persons with disability. I think the European Union clarify because now the structural fund preview the habilitant condition, but it's not clear if are not clarified. So I think if the European Union can do some very important document that explain exactly what mean use European Union respecting accessibility.
Thank you, Giampiero. And the third and last question, maybe we have a question online, and then I'll give the floor to the panel.
Yes, thank you. We have a few questions online. I will ask one which I think is relevant maybe for this panel. The question is, are there any plans to make voting accessible to blind persons? Presumably this is within the scope of Accessible EU that the question has been asked. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think the first question was addressed to you.
Okay. I'm putting my clock. I think I'm going to need more than 3 minutes to answer that, all those questions. Very many questions, very interesting questions. So the first question on the barriers that persons with intellectual disabilities, including persons with intellectual disabilities, experience in accessing some services. You mentioned banking, buying online, for example, even access to medical care of medical records because of this identification issue. It is indeed a barrier. I'm not going to deny that. It's obvious that it is. There are existing barriers in that direction, and that is why I have a lot of hopes on the Accessibility Act implementation, not for all the sectors, but for the sectors that are covered. And in the sectors that are covered, we have banking, we have got e-commerce. And I think the power of the provisions of e-commerce still need to see the light, because any website that has a commercial transaction where you can pay, you can buy, will have to be accessible. And the issue of identification, the issue of being able to interact with that website is included in the European Accessibility Act. Now, you will tell me the Act does not cover all the sectors. That's true. But the moment that we have got for these key sectors developments in order to make those processes of economic transactions being made accessible, I'm convinced that it will have an impact in other sectors, because I'm convinced that, and I think reality has proven that making this type of interfaces accessible makes them easy to use, and they are more beneficial for the rest of the population. So there would be a shift towards more accessible. Now, I'm also not naive, and this will take time. We are entering into a territoire now on the development of these technologies that are already settled. They are already functioning, and it's not anymore develop something new that is accessible. We are already in the area of ICT in the situation of retrofitting the digital world. It's something that we had tried many years ago to put on the table. Let's advance and let's make sure that new developments are already accessible. Well, reality is telling us we are already in a digital world and there are barriers. So now we will have to work on the dismantling and not only on the prevention, because it's a twin track approach. We see you have in the conference 2 panels on artificial intelligence. We are seeing a huge development of new technological fields where we need to prevent accessibility barriers. At the same time, we have to act on the existing digital world and dismantle the barriers. Now, going to the second question, I hope I get another 3 minutes. Bargaining with the chair. No, because it's a very complex question. I have to say what Giampiero has put forward. It's again another challenge. We have work in setting the policy, the legal conditions requiring accessibility. Now, we are working, I think there is more and more awareness about the obligation of using the EU money in accessible, considering accessibility. The structural funds, I think it's, in the structural funds, it's more and more a reality. In other new funds or other different funds that were issued after, during the pandemic and so forth, the legal provisions are different. But as you said, I mean, one of the biggest barriers that for spending funding, EU funding, national funding, because at the end, this spending of European funding happens at national level. And let's not forget, national governments are also bound on their own by the UNCRPD and the accessibility obligations. So one of the biggest barriers is lack of knowledge, competence, and awareness. And we are very conscious of that. That's why we launched the Accessible EU, in order to bring the capacity for implementation. We have put in place all these rules, the standards to facilitate, but now we need to have the people that have the competence to do it, that they are aware and they have the capacity, the skills, the competence, the knowledge in order to be able to implement. In addition, let me say also, referring to the Accessibility Act, that contains specific provisions that link the accessibility requirements of the Act with EU funds. And it gives the presumption of compliance with accessibility obligations when you use the specific provisions of the on accessibility, the specific requirements on accessibility in the funds. So again, we established that link to facilitate what is accessibility. Because I know that this is a debate that's happening in many member states. You know, oh, yes, we already comply with some accessibility. No, we have accessibility standards. We have got these accessibility requirements in the Act, and they tell us what is accessibility and what level. And on the guidance, I would like to point you to a very interesting and a very good guidance that the Commission, it was done with my colleagues responsible for the public procurement directives, is a guide called Buying Social. And there you have complete section on guidance on how you buy accessible. And let's not forget that most of the money of the EU funds is often spent through public procurement. So there again, you find this link. So I hope I've answered both questions, and I leave the third one, I don't know, for you to decide who will answer.
Thank you, Ina. Maybe Anna or Mr. Hernández, would you like to respond to elections being made accessible for blind people? When, how? Anna first.
Well, I could just kind of give a framework of that. In Sweden, the latest election last year was unfortunately problematic for people of disabilities, and most concerning than blind people. There's been projects trying to reach a kind of a best practice and solution to the issue that people who are blind will not be able to vote with a kept secret what to vote on. These unfortunately have been put down by the new government, so we are still looking for an answer, and would be happy to have the EU to develop a fair enough system for this. So this would be something that would be of course a right for everyone in the EU. And can I just add something also to the discussion, please? I would say that there's an issue that focusing too much on funds and too much on inaccessibility in some countries and some not. In Sweden, we have a high moral standards when it comes to accessibility, and we do have means for combating barriers, but still the process has been slowed down. So I think we need to also make sure we have the legal requirements and effective mechanisms such as indicators and stuff like that. So of course, in some countries, funding is a real issue, but do not forget the fact that that's not enough. People need to kind of feel the obligation, unfortunately, to actually put this into practice. That's my view from a local perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anna, share on this.
No, and about the voting, Accessible EU is a resource knowledge center, so we are not a decision maker. We can share and collect the good practices and disseminate the good practices and encourage that the decision makers to promote and to do that, and encouraged by the Commission or the national governments. So, but I think Inma can respond to this question. It's better than me.
Thank you. Before doing that, let's take a second round of questions, starting here at the front.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Rui from Språk, Europe, and let me only do a little question. The question of accessible books is not only for blind people, because people with some kind of motor disorders, like cannot write or cannot fold bullet paper, has some problem to keep the vote secret. So this is more than only one kind of disability. The question of the vote is more expensive. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take a second question from the floor or online. We have an online question, I see, in the back. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks. So we have another question. This one is for Inmaculada. It says, the national standardization organizations are autonomous. We depend on how much they let us participate because it's not really obligatory. How can you help national disability platforms and organizations to convince the standardization bodies not to treat us too casually or to push aside our requests to actively participate and give input and feedback?
Thank you. And we'll take a third question, perhaps online. We have one in the room.
Thank you. I'm Tina Nomi Södergren from the Swedish Association of Visually Impaired. And I would like to ask about the standardization when it comes to accessibility. I understand how useful it is, but how is it when you look into the individual adjustments that has to be done in accessibility issues? How do you look upon the combination and the possibilities to secure that persons are also have their individual possibilities to adaptation and adjustment according to CRPD? Thank you.
Thank you. Voting for people with other impairments than the blind or visually impaired. Ima.
Okay, so yes, the issue of participation in political processes is wider than just the voting, okay? The voting is really a key part, but the Commission is working with the Member States because my major responsibility on this political participation is on Member States' competences. Nevertheless, in view of the European elections, the Commission is working with the Member States through the bodies that are responsible for electoral practices at the national level in order to provide guidance, examples, good practices to promote and to ensure the participation of persons with disabilities in these in elections. Now, indeed, as it has been said, there are many issues. There is the issues starting from the right to vote to then the practicalities of how do you vote, enter in the voting place, being able to vote, blind persons often in privately with ballots that are accessible. There are issues related to information about the political parties' programs and so forth. And so we are working, I mean, it's basically a responsibility of our colleagues in the DHS, but we work together with them to develop this practice. They have a forum. In fact, we have been working together with EDF in the previous elections in order to enrich the catalogue of good practices that has been put forward by the Commission. I think this is an area that requires really, I agree with all of you, a lot of attention, and also in relation to the new technological developments. I mean, we're moving to electronic voting, remote voting, voting machines, and in all that area also we will be confronted with accessibility issues. So quite a number of domains in which we need to, it's necessary to act to ensure the equal access to political participation that the Convention states. Yeah. Would you like me to go to the second question? Okay. The national standardization bodies participation. You want to? Yes, that's the one I was going to answer. So first of all, if I understood correctly the question, because I could not hear very well, but there are, even when persons with disabilities wish to participate and they reach out to the national standardization bodies, that's what I understood, the national standardization bodies are not willing to take them on board in these delegations. Well, when that is the case, I would say report it to the European standardization organizations, Senelec and ETSI, but please really document the case, because this is an important issue. Write to the European Commission, to the colleagues responsible for the standardization regulation. The standardization regulation explicitly makes reference to persons with disabilities participation and the UN CRPD. So we need to hear back from you. And then I would like to point, I'm going to put my glasses to be here. We have got on the Swedish side, Hans, and on the European side, Susanna, I don't know where she is, there she is. Though Hans and Susanna, they are working on accessibility standardization at European level and are heavily involved in from the Swedish side. So go back to them. Really, write back, and indicate when you have those barriers, because your participation is really most welcome. I don't know if the Swedish standardization organizations are here beyond Hans and Susanna, but this cannot really be the case.
Inma, can I share my point of view about this?
Accessibility standards, leaving room for individual modifications and leaving room for the individual to choose their adaptation.
I'm going back to the essence, first to the essence of accessibility. Accessibility is a tool, one tool to achieve the equal enjoyment of rights in the Convention. It's not an end in itself. It's an instrument, and as an instrument, it covers part of what needs to be done for that enjoyment of equal rights and access on equal basis with others. The other part that goes hand in hand is the part of reasonable accommodation, assistive technology, personal assistance. There is a personal component, an individualized component that requires some adjustments that has to go hand in hand with accessibility. I'm going back to the Accessibility Act, and because I understand the question is in the context of technology, assistive technology versus mainstream accessible technology, and tell you that in the Accessibility Act, we have got provisions, and these are really very advanced provisions, they are really unique provisions that require mainstream providers to ensure interoperability with assistive technology. The Act requires to identify those assistive technologies with which the mainstream accessible technology has been tested and works together. Because the intention is to develop this tandem. I could not be more in agreement with the person that put the question. Accessibility needs to go hand in hand with assistive technology. But in the area of technology, but in other areas, is exactly the same. Accessibility, at the end of the day, is a construct in which, as it is defined in our policies and legislation, in which we set the removal of the most common barriers that persons with disabilities experience. But no standard on accessibility is sufficient to cater for all the diversity on accessibility. Similarly, I mean, those standards are following on accessibility, follow universal design approach, which aim to enlarge the base of persons that are considered into the development of those standards. But there is a space in which we need, of course, assistive technology, assistive solution, personal assistance, you name it, reasonable accommodation. And that needs to go hand in hand. And the mainstream accessibility policies, legislations, standards need to cater for that seamless interfacing or interoperability or working hand in hand together. And that's what we try to do with the Accessibility Act, and I hope that that will be also in other policies. By the way, just 1 second, to say also that this is the logic that the European Commission put already in 2008 in the equal treatment proposal based on non-discrimination for persons with disabilities, that says that for the equal treatment of persons with disabilities, you need to have on one hand a reasonable accommodation, but on the other hand, effective non-discriminatory access working together. So this is, I hope I have answered the question.
I want to thank all panelists, audience, for your questions on accessibility on an EU level to a local community level. On all levels, more awareness is needed, training is needed. The European EU Accessibility Centre will be a great resource of knowledge on reasonable accommodation, on universal design. And we're looking forward to clear instructions of how EU funding can be used, how we can access the knowledge on accessibility. I really hope you enjoy your lunch. Thanks for coming, thanks for attending, those online and those physically present here in Stockholm. Enjoy your lunch. And an applause for the panel members.
So once again, a big thank you for this very interesting panel discussion. I've learned a lot. Hope you have also, both in the audience here and online. So before you can leave the room now, very important thing, there is one microphone missing. Who put it in a bag? So if you you know you have a microphone somewhere, please. So hopefully we'll get it back. So now we have our lunch break, but before you leave the room, as I said, I just have to inform you that the lunch is on the 7th floor. So you could take the stairs if you prefer that, or otherwise you take the elevators outside here. And there are people to guide you, so you get to your table upstairs on the 7th floor. And when you find your table, you can just sit down, relax, the food will come to you. That's a good one. And if you're online, unfortunately, we can't give you lunch from here, but I hope you take a good lunch break and have something to eat. And then we will be back here in this room, 2 o'clock sharp. Okay? Have a good lunch. And thank you once again to the panel.